The molar mass is the mass of 1 mole of atoms of that element. What if we have a compound? Well, we learned at the end of chapter 5 how to find the formula mass for a compound. Like for water, there's 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. So if we had a mole of hydrogen molecules, we'd have 2 moles of hydrogen and 2 moles of oxygen. Just like if you had a dozen tricycles, how many dozen wheels would you have? A dozen tricycles would have how many wheels? 3 dozen, because each tricycle has 3 wheels. How many seats would 3 dozen tricycles have? I said 3 dozen, that's why I confused you. I meant a dozen. How many seats would a dozen tricycles have? 12 seats, right? Do these numbers in my head and they flurry about. So we're going to be using that formula mass concept. It's important to remember that ionic compounds do not have individual molecules, and so we refer to those as having formula units for the ionic compounds. So there is a difference between molecules and formula units, but in practice, the way you calculate them is exactly the same. Okay, and I'm not going to try to trick you on an exam with questions about formula mass versus molecular mass. But the formula mass is the mass of a formula unit. The molecular mass is the mass of a molecule. The molar mass is the mass of a mole of whatever units those are. So it's going to be equal to that formula mass for the compound. So let's do a couple of these. Formula mass for calcium nitrate. So what we're going to do is we're going to find out, well, how much does 1 mole of calcium weigh? We look on the periodic table. It's 40.08. So we've got 1, because there's 1 calcium atom, or 1 mole of calcium atoms, 40.08. And we're just going to add them up. How many nitrogens are in that formula unit? There's 2. So if we're talking about a mole of calcium nitrate, then there's 2 moles of nitrogen. And so we have 2 times the mass of nitrogen. How many oxygens? 6. 2 times 3 is 6. There are 6 moles of oxygen in 1 mole of calcium nitrate. So 6 times 16, which is the molar mass of oxygen. And then we get out our calculators again. 40.08 plus 2 times 14.01 plus 6 times 16. Those are the actual buttons I'm pushing. So this comes out to 164.1. So when we were calculating the formula mass, we were talking about a formula unit. And so if we have 1 formula unit of calcium nitrate, it weighs 164.1, what's the unit? Atomic mass units. I didn't read the question very carefully, so I kind of talked about it wrong. This first question is saying calculate the formula mass of calcium nitrate. That's what we learned to do in section 5.11. We took the numbers from the periodic table and multiplied them by the numbers of each atom and added them up, and the unit was atomic mass units. What is the molar mass of calcium nitrate? What's the mass of 1 mole of calcium nitrate ions? It's the same number. We calculate it in exactly the same way, only the unit is different. 164.1 grams. That equals 1 mole of calcium nitrate. So we learned to calculate the formula mass in 5.11. What we're doing here is we're doing exactly the same calculation, but the unit is different. It's grams instead of atomic mass units. If atomic mass units kind of just freak you out and mess with your mind and you just have a big issue with them, you can pass this class without understanding atomic mass units. You're going to have a hard time passing the class if you can't calculate a molar mass of something like calcium nitrate. Okay? I'm not going to try to trick you and ask you questions like this and see if you know which unit to use with which word. Okay, what I want is that you can come up with this number. So let's do an example here. Calculate the mass in grams of 2.48 moles of phosphorus pentachloride. So they're asking us to go 2.48, whoops, not grams, moles. And they're asking us to convert to grams. So we learned today that we can convert between moles and grams. We need a molar mass. That's the conversion. If it's an atom, it's easy. It's just on the periodic table. If it's a compound, then we have to actually add some things up. Here, they're being especially tricky, and they're giving us the name, and we have to figure out what the formula is. What's the formula for phosphorus pentachloride? PCl5. Phosphorus and chloride are both nonmetals, and so we use the prefixes. We need to know what the molar mass for this is. There's one phosphorus. Phosphorus is 30.97. And there's 5 chlorines, and chlorine is 35.45. And so we get 208.22 grams equals 1 mole. That's the molar mass. So then we go 2.48 moles of phosphorus pentachloride. We're going to multiply by grams and divide by moles, because that's what the units tell us to do. 1 mole equals 208.22 grams of phosphorus pentachloride. 2.48 times 208.22 equals, how many significant figures should our answer have? It should have 3. I ignored significant figures on that molar mass because I knew we weren't done, and the number we were given only had 3. So that's going to limit our answer, 516. We're calculating grams of phosphorus pentachloride.